I finally got rid of my hated mother-in-law. I'm finally free from that woman. No matter how devotedly I cared for her, she always treated me badly and never showed any gratitude. But then, something happened that made me start to doubt. Maybe I had been completely mistaken. I started to move in order to find out the truth. And there, I discovered a shocking truth hidden beneath the surface, and I trembled with fear. Our dad had already passed away, and Mom was living comfortably on her own, so there was no need for Shelley to worry. That was before we got married. When I expressed concern about the mother-in-law problem after receiving the proposal, my husband Ted, who is 2 years older, told me that. But things didn't go as planned, and after all, people are people no matter what. Right from the beginning of our marriage, I never felt accepted by my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law graduated from college and worked as a middle school teacher until retirement, and she was a very strict person. He graduated from college carrying his mother's expectations and worked for a first-class company. In contrast, when it comes to teachers, I always get nervous and want to run away. I wasn't very good at studying, always receiving remedial lessons, and barely graduated from high school. What kind of books do you usually read, Shelley? Ted and I have different tastes, so we can't really talk about them. I haven't been reading much lately either. I love mystery novels myself, and I have a lot in my room. Maybe I can lend you some? Actually, I'm not really good with printed text. I was particularly bad at modern and classical literature, and I hated even looking at the lines of text in textbooks. So, it was impossible for me to read novels or anything like that. I couldn't properly respond to questions from my mother-in-law. Oh, well. Never mind then. My mother-in-law said dismissively with a sigh, and after that, she never brought up any topics to talk with me. From then on, my mother-in-law seemed somehow colder towards me, and I even felt looked down upon. Still, since I only met her once every 3 months because we lived apart, I tried not to mind it too much and could bear it. In contrast to the awkward mother-in-law issues, the relationship between the couple was good. Hey, how about we go to a hot spring overnight for Shelley's 33rd birthday next week? Can you take the day off? Really? Thank you. Actually, I was hoping you had something planned and took some days off in advance. You're pretty clever. But that's what I like about you, Shelley. Let's have a great time. Ted always thought about me, but there were aspects of him I only learned about after we got married. One of them was that he had no savings, and he was extravagant with money. Did you buy another new watch? You just replaced one recently. I fell in love with this limited edition at first sight. I thought it was fate. There you go again. If you keep shopping like this, you'll run out of savings, you know? Oh, not to brag, but my savings account is 0. It was meant to be a light joke, but I was shocked at how confidently my husband responded, and I was left speechless. 35 years old and still not over his bachelor ways. We agreed to start saving a little each month and decided to see how it goes for a while. However, 6 months had passed without that promise being kept. Hey, Ted. We can't keep going like this. We need to do something about our lifestyle. Huh? What's wrong? I'm happy every day. I am too, but that's not it. We might want kids in the future, and I'd like to build our own home. So, let's start saving together. Even though I wasn't sure if my words were reaching him, I spoke honestly about my feelings. If that's the case, my current salary is just enough to cover our living expenses. Can't you save from what you earn? His company is a major corporation, and he surely earns much more than I do as a full-time employee at a smaller company. That can't be true. What have you been spending money on? Well, just tell me. We're married, aren't we? The truth is, I have some debts, and I've been paying them off every month. This was the first time I had heard such a thing, and I dropped my smartphone on the floor in shock. Oh, but the repayment will be over soon, so it's okay. He wouldn't tell me how much the debt was or how much he was paying back each month. Even so, I can only feel uneasy right now. I have to think about our future together. Is that okay with you? Since being gentle didn't get through to him, I looked him in the eye and told him firmly. Enough already. I don't want to be nagged by you. Ted's expression quickly turned grim, and just as he furrowed his brow, he pushed me away. He's usually so calm, I can't believe he'd do something like this. I was shocked and frightened, and before I knew it, my arms and legs were trembling uncontrollably. I thought that if my parents or friends knew about this, they would worry, so I decided not to tell anyone. Maybe I was also being a bit too persistent about the money. We're married now, after all. Maybe we should take more time to talk things through. I couldn't keep worrying, so I decided to think positively. Then, I got a call from Ted saying that his mother had a severe accident and was hospitalized. According to Ted, a neighbor found his mother collapsed in the garden and called an ambulance. Moreover, she was unconscious on the way to the hospital, though she has since woken up. This is serious. I'll head to the hospital right away. No, Shelley, you don't need to come. Why not? Mom said she doesn't want to see you. Despite being hurt by his words, I somehow understood how his mother felt. She's a proud person, she wouldn't want to show herself in a weakened state. His mother had suffered a severe blow to the left side of her head and now needed care. When she's discharged, we'll have to take care of her. I think we should live together. Wait. Can your mom not live on her own anymore? According to him, she had paralysis on her right side and was having some difficulty speaking, requiring help with daily life. You can't just leave her, can you? True, but I think your mom wouldn't want me taking care of her. The mother-in-law who had said she didn't want to see me when she was hospitalized. It must be incredibly painful for her to be seen in such a disabled state. Moreover, the thought of living with her, with whom I do not get along, weighed heavily on me, and I hoped to avoid it somehow. Of course, I won't leave it all to you, Shelley. I'll help as much as I can. She's important family to me. I understand. Reluctantly, but unable to refuse any further in the face of Ted's earnest pleading, I agreed. Once we started living together, Ted began to stay away from home more often, using his busy job as an excuse. We received a notice from the city office about your mother's care assessment. She's been rated as needing level 2 care. Oh, is that so? I don't really understand all that, so I'll leave it all to you, Shelley. Ultimately, I ended up taking care of her alone while still working. I explained the situation to my company and switched to primarily working from home, though there were times I had to go into the office. I talked to the care manager, and it seems there are various welfare services available for someone at care level 2. I thought it would be good if she could attend a day service or have a helper come over during the hours I was away, and I suggested this to Ted. What? That would cost money. If you adjust your work and take care of her, we can avoid unnecessary expenses. He flatly opposed the idea without even listening to the details, and ultimately, the burden on me just increased. One day, when I absolutely had to go to the office, my mother-in-law was alone at home. When I finished work and rushed home, my heart leapt as soon as I entered her room. Hey! What happened, Mom? Normally, she would be sitting on the bed or in a chair, but she was collapsed in front of the dresser. Were you trying to get something out of here? I told you not to walk around alone, it's dangerous. Shut up. Though her speech was impaired, she struggled to get the words out and rejected my help. If you dislike my help so much, don't make it harder than it has to be. Moreover, it wasn't just this time. She often fell and couldn't get up on her own around the room. Lifting my partially paralyzed mother-in-law off the floor was quite a strain, even with my strength. No matter how devotedly I served and showed sincerity, her attitude toward me did not change. Get out of here! Eventually, such cruel words became more frequent. I can't stand this anymore. I wish she would just pass away. Exhausted both physically and mentally, I found myself thinking these insensitive thoughts. Then, one day after a while, Mom's under my watch today, Shelley. Why don't you go relax at a cafe or something? Cheered by this unexpected and welcome suggestion from my husband, I left the house with a spring in my step. Just getting out like this once in a while really helps change my mood. While I was enjoying some alone time for the first time in a long time, I received a call from Ted. What's up? I'll be home soon. Is it urgent?
Mom's been taken to the hospital. It might be serious.
But she was just having tea as usual before I left. Confused by the sudden turn of events, I rushed to the hospital. There, I saw Ted looking downcast in the waiting room. How's Mom? He slowly looked up at me and, with a face expressing sadness and perhaps apathy, shook his head. While she had needed care, she had been medically stable and suddenly passed away. The hospital asked if we wanted to investigate further, but Ted refused, and we decided to bring her back home right away. From there to the funeral, everything happened so quickly, and we were so busy that there was no time to grieve. Well, it wasn't so much a lack of time. The relief of being freed from the burden was more pronounced, so perhaps that's why I didn't shed any tears. However, I was worried about my husband.
Ted, are you okay?
Yeah. Sorry, did you say something? Nothing important, but maybe you should rest a bit? He seemed restless, and the next moment, he was distant. Since the day his mother passed, he just hasn't been himself. It's a shock for him, losing his mother, whom he cared so much about. I managed to get through the funeral by supporting my husband. That night. Ted's not here. Maybe he's in the bathroom? In the middle of the night, I woke up and realized that he wasn't in bed next to me. I was thirsty and decided to head to the kitchen, and as I slowly walked down the stairs, I could hear my husband's voice coming from the living room. He must have been on the phone. The insurance money for Mom will be coming in soon, so I can pay off the debt. What? My voice slipped out involuntarily, and I hurried to cover my mouth, but it seemed he hadn't noticed. Peeking through the gap in the door, I saw him end the call and casually lie down on the couch while looking at his smartphone. I failed last time, but this time it worked out. The cremation is done too, so there's no worry about being investigated now. The light from his phone revealed a creepy smile on Ted's face, something I had never seen before. Wait a minute. What does that mean? Could he have? If that's the case. Doubts surfaced, and I shivered with fear. However, I knew I couldn't just leave things as they were and decided I needed to look into my husband's activities. But while he was home, I couldn't make any careless moves. Afterwards, various thoughts crossed my mind, and I spent almost the entire night unable to sleep. Ted's week of bereavement leave had ended, and he went back to work as usual today. The question is, how am I gonna investigate him? Still having a few days off work myself, I pondered while cleaning out his mother's room. When I moved the mattress she had used and tried to clean underneath, I found something. What's this? A piece of paper slipped out from between the frame and the mattress, with just unidentifiable character written on it. Of course, I had no idea what it meant. I wonder if it's just a random scrap that ended up here? That's what I thought, but as I was taking out clothes from the dresser to organize them, another piece of paper with just one character came out. This time it was again, unidentifiable character, but somewhat readable. Oh. Maybe these are supposed to be read together. Feeling a hunch, I thought there might be more pieces of paper, so I decided to search the room just in case. Then, papers started coming out from everywhere. Arranging them, I was shocked to realize it was a message left by my mother-in-law. I decided to investigate further to understand it better. 3 days later, on Sunday. Both of us were off work. I'm tired from all the cleaning. How about we go for a walk to clear our minds?
Sounds good. It's nice weather today too. Maybe we'll grab some food on the way back.
My husband was eager about my sudden suggestion and started getting ready, humming along. As we started walking from the house, he raised his hands in the air. It feels great outside. When was the last time we went for a walk together like this? Ted stretched happily while looking up at the sky. Shelley, what's wrong? When I remained silent, he leaned in to look at my face. Hey, your mom was stable, so why did she suddenly pass away? I stared intently into my husband's eyes. What? Isn't it because she was old? You never know what might happen with elderly people. But there were no problems at her last doctor's visit, right? I murmured, and though he must have heard, he didn't answer. Do you actually know something? Come on, don't start talking nonsense. Just as we arrived in front of a park, I ignored my flustered husband's words and suggested we sit on a bench. It was understandably busy with families, being a holiday. It'd be nice if we could come here for a picnic with our whole family once we have kids. Sitting on the bench, Ted changed the subject, or maybe he meant it, I couldn't tell, but he didn't meet my eyes as he spoke. Back to what we were talking about, wasn't your mom not sick, but you killed her? You shouldn't be saying such dangerous things without evidence. What would I gain by killing my own mother? He raised his voice and shouted angrily, his breath heavy. At that, all eyes in the park turned towards my husband. Just as planned. Actually, I had deliberately chosen a busy park for our walk because I thought if anything happened at home, I wouldn't be able to handle Ted alone. Noticing the glances from people whispering and looking our way, my husband seemed taken aback. Maybe we should drop this topic. We're not done here. You had a motive to make your mother gone, didn't you? Enough already. Shelley, do you have a grudge against me? Oh, I get it. You're holding a grudge because I didn't help with the caregiving, aren't you? He laughed awkwardly, trying to dismiss the conversation or change the subject, his expression tense. Don't change the subject. You needed your mother's life insurance to pay off your debts, didn't you?
What are you talking about? Yes, I have debts, but I never knew my mom had any insurance.
While he looked flustered and denied it with gestures, his eyes darted around. Really? Then why was this in your room?
Did you go into my study without permission?
After you said yes, I pulled out a file from my bag and showed it to him. Why do you have this? The documents I handed him included a loan agreement, collection notices, and the life insurance claim for his mother. While Ted was at work, I had opened a drawer in his study and found these documents tucked away at the back. The amount of debt he had mentioned as being a little turned out to be millions of dollars, and his mother's insurance money was more than enough to cover it. There's more.
What? Enough already.
Ted's shouting grew louder, drawing attention from people around us again. I think this is conclusive evidence. I pulled another piece of paper from my bag and thrust it at him. Upon seeing it, he was lost for words and began frantically scratching his head. I copied your planner. Planning in detail to send your own mother to the other side? Moreover, it was written, use the insurance money to pay off the debt. Honestly, I couldn't tell how many times he had tried to execute this plan, but he might have been living with us, waiting for the right moment. This is just a simulation, like something out of a mystery novel. I love mysteries just like Mom did. He talked about his desperate excuse as if it was something to be proud of, real story-like. I've never seen you reading novels though. Your mother-in-law said the same thing right after we got married. That is. Seemingly cornered, Ted fell silent. Just a little more. I'm going all in now. I reached into my bag again and this time pulled out a folded piece of paper and thrust it in front of my husband. Look at this next. There's more. With a weary expression, he reluctantly unfolded the paper. What's this? Worm-like messy handwriting. Is this some kind of quick note? Ted scoffed through his nose, mocking me, and shoved it back at me. It was a piece of paper pasted together with the words behind the bookshelf written shakily one character at a time. Actually, this was a message left by his mother. I wondered if his mother had been moving around the room alone to hide these, and had fallen as a result. I searched around the places she had fallen. Sure enough, I found a total of several pieces of paper, and when arranged, they read behind the bookshelf. This was the last message your mother-in-law tried to communicate with her unfamiliar left hand. Huh? So what? I don't even understand what that means. True. I wondered what it was too. But it was a trick to make sure you wouldn't understand immediately even if you happened to search the room. It seemed just like something a mystery novel enthusiast like his mother would do.
This could just be some kind of prank from Mom, right?
It would have been nice for you if that were true. But let's be real, she was in need of care. There's no way she was playing around like that. What are you even talking about? Anyway, I'm not involved. Shelley, who was treated coldly by her, has more of a motive, doesn't she? He vehemently denied it and turned the accusation towards me, not the gentle and calm Ted I knew. He must be trying to escape the blame somehow. Even his expressions and tone were harsher than I had ever seen.
I may have resented her, but I never thought of killing her.
We'll see about that. According to your mother's message, I checked behind the bookshelf and found a smartphone. Look at this. I powered on her smartphone and showed him a video. In the video, his mother appeared, slowly struggling to speak despite her condition. She said, "I might be being targeted by my son." Your mother-in-law knew all about it, didn't she? Damn. Furthermore, when his mother first got injured and was hospitalized, she said she had been pushed off the porch. She had hit her head hard and couldn't move, and she had seen Ted, who was supposed to be at work. However, she thought she shouldn't speak out as she wasn't certain. And she didn't want to believe that her own son could do such a thing to her. Indeed, I can only conclude that Ted tried to send his mother to the other side but failed, leaving her in need of care. And the reason she kept telling me to get out was probably because she was trying to protect me from harm. In the video, she spoke of these things. When I learned that her cold words were actually full of concern and deep love for me, I was filled with regret. For even a moment, I deeply regretted wishing she would just pass away. And so, thinking it the least I could do to make amends, I decided to avenge my mother-in-law's grievances by punishing my husband.
You pushed her off the porch, didn't you? Even if you try to deny it, it can be found out with an investigation. There's no evidence.
If we check the location data on your smartphone, we can easily find out where you were that day. Ted's face froze, and after a moment his eyes darted about before he contorted his face in frustration. Man, that old lady was tough. Should have been over in one go. Well, at least she was useful for paying off my debts in the end. I bet she'd be happy about that. Ted had been silent for a while, but suddenly he defiantly started throwing insults.
She wouldn't be happy about this. This is nothing but regrettable. You have no idea how I felt. Living in fear of debt collectors, dedicating most of my salary to repayments, constantly building up stress.
I don't understand. It's your own fault for being so careless with money. It all happened because you got hooked on gambling, didn't it? That is, well, that's... Ted stumbled over his words, apparently hit the mark. Regardless of the reason, this is a crime. I'm going to report you to the police. The police? If you do that, I'll lose my job, won't I? Not just that, you'll probably be spending quite some time behind bars.
Come on, give me a break. The debts are gone, and the nuisance is gone. Let's start a new life together, please.
My husband burst into tears, his face crumbling as he literally begged me, crying.
The one who wants to cry is me. There's no way I can live with you anymore.
I expressed my feelings and pushed him away.
You always take advantage when I'm being nice.
Ted lashed out in anger, pushing me off the bench to the ground.
Stop it.
Seemingly forgetting we were in a public park, he mounted me, raising his hand to strike. But that was as far as he got. People nearby intervened, telling him to stop.
I'm calling the police.
Ted collapsed crying while being restrained.
Sincerely apologize to your mother. And face what you've done.
After saying that, I called the police, and soon the flashing lights of a patrol car approached. Thus, he was taken away by the arriving officers. Later, I explained the situation and submitted all the evidence. Unable to withstand the intense police interrogation, Ted quickly confessed and was arrested for injuring his mother the first time, and now for her death, receiving a prison sentence. Of course, I divorced Ted. In her last video message, my mother-in-law had said she would leave all her estate to me for caring for her. I debated what to do but decided to accept only part of the substantial inheritance, entrusting the rest to a lawyer to donate to those in need. Now having moved, I've started a new life on my own. Though I'm busy with work, I plan to spend my time peacefully and at my own pace from now on. And while feeling grateful to my mother-in-law who tried to protect me despite her condition, I occasionally visit her grave to talk about recent events. Promising to live positively and true to myself under the expansive blue sky.
It's thanks to me that you're alive, you parasite. If you have a problem, then divorce me and get out.
In John's eyes, the kindness that was evident when we first met was now gone, replaced by a chilling coldness. The glasses he wore and the tie around his neck looked rather expensive, making it clear just how self-centered John had become just from his appearance and behavior. Fine, I'll leave. I said that, packed my things, and left immediately. And I vowed to retaliate against John. My name is Linda. I work as an administrative assistant in a company and live with my mother. Although I seem pretty ordinary, there's one thing about me that sets me apart from everyone else. That is, I use a wheelchair. In fact, due to a traffic accident I had in my student days, I had to live my life in a wheelchair, even though I wasn't fatally injured. When I first started using a wheelchair, there was a lot I had to get used to, and it was quite challenging. But, people are resilient, and once you've spent enough time in a wheelchair, you get the hang of it. Sometimes I wonder if this is what folks would call a silver lining in a cloud. To be able to think that way probably means I've come to a good place mentally. But just going to work and coming back home isn't enough to make life fulfilling. So, my favorite pastime was going to the local library in town to read. I've loved books since I was a kid, and even now as an adult, I'm still a bookworm. And that day too, I was at the library. But on that day, there was a medium-sized rock at the entrance for some reason, and I had trouble getting past it. The one who helped me was John. With his help, I could enter the library without a hitch. From then on, I often saw John at the library, and eventually, we started dating and finally got married. And so, I began living with John. But after a while, John made a surprising proposal.
Linda, I want you to take good care of our home, and I want you to be my rock. So, I'd like you to be a stay-at-home wife. Please.
Wait, a stay-at-home wife? John suddenly pleaded with me to become a stay-at-home wife, but to be honest, I really didn't want to quit my job. But John kept asking me over and over to be a stay-at-home wife, so in the end, I gave in. My colleagues never expected me to resign and tried hard to convince me to stay, but at the time, I prioritized my husband's wish over everything. In fact, just the act of telling the company I wanted to resign was exhausting, and by the time I did resign, I was mentally drained. Since I quit my job, life has felt dull and uninteresting. Out of boredom, I called my old college friend, Alicia, to vent, but she was quite critical of my feelings. In this day and age, where both men and women usually work, husbands who ask their working wives to become stay-at-home wives are rare. Linda, you're blessed, and you should be more grateful for your current situation. Alicia, unlike me, always talks about wanting to quit her job. It was clear that we had contrasting views. I had hoped Alicia might at least pretend to empathize with my frustrations, but she completely shut me down, leaving me feeling lonely. Plus, the allowance John gives me for household expenses is minimal, and I've had to be very frugal. When it wasn't enough, I had to dip into the savings I had accumulated when I was working full-time. Because of that, I was determined to not overspend and started cutting back significantly on my beauty expenses. Still, my savings were dwindling. Watching the balance decrease became a sad daily ritual, leaving me in a sour mood. But I found it hard to voice these concerns to my hardworking family, so I kept silent. So, without my fulfilling job and having to skimp on beauty expenses, the only joy left in my life was borrowing books from the library. Libraries are great, right? Being able to borrow books for free is awesome. At that time, I was more focused on saving money, and the joy of reading was overshadowed by the fact that I was borrowing books for free. It was a bit of a shock to realize how having less money could change one's perspective so much. Nowadays, with streaming services, you can listen to music for free, and there are definitely more free entertainment options than a few years ago. But, no matter how many free entertainment options there are, the reality of having less money still brings down your spirits. Even in such a situation, I still loved John. I didn't want to bring up anything with John that could lead to an argument, even if it meant distancing myself from him. For that reason, I never told John about the lack of household allowance. Instead, I silently endured, escaping reality by immersively reading books while listening to free music. However, after a while, John started coming home late more frequently. Concerned, I asked John, "You've been coming home late recently. Is something wrong?" To which John replied, "Work's been busy, and I've been doing overtime. Sorry for making you worry." Honestly, in this modern age where overtime is becoming rare, I wondered if he could really be working late so often. But, given that I was relying on him for our living expenses, I found it hard to question him further and let the matter slide. But one day, John unexpectedly stayed out overnight. Feeling suspicious, I checked John's phone while he was in the shower. To my dismay, it was full of evidence that John had been cheating on me. Moreover, it seemed that the woman he was seeing had been in a relationship with him even before we got married. Even after finding undeniable proof, I didn't have the courage to confront John about his infidelity. I guess, back then, I was still in love with him and couldn't muster the strength. However, I was hurt by his betrayal and saved the evidence of his affair on my phone. The revelation of John's cheating devastated me. On top of that, there was no sign of him increasing the allowance he gave me. Even though we were married, I wondered why I was the only one enduring such misery. Overthinking the situation gave me migraines, adding to my worries. Life felt so terrible. Yet, every morning, I had to prepare breakfast and lunch for John. By that time, I had grown weary of making meals for him, wondering why I even had to cater to such a man, often sighing in frustration. John seemed oblivious to how I felt, quietly eating his breakfast and heading off to work with his packed lunch. "He's probably gonna come home late again," I thought, sighing once more. But, surprisingly, John came home early that day and dined with me. However, he began criticizing me, saying, "The dinner today tastes off. And you're my wife, you should try to look prettier." Looking back, John might have been having dinner at his mistress's house, which could have been why he was coming home late. So, without realizing it, he might have been comparing me to his mistress, which is probably why he made such comments to me. I finally lost my temper and shouted at him, "After all the effort I put into making dinner, all you do is complain. Plus, I know about your affair. The reason I can't always look my best is that you barely give me enough money to get by. I've been using up my savings from when I was single because what you give isn't enough. I was better off when I was working and single." John, realizing that I knew of his affair, impulsively picked up a vase nearby and splashed its water at me. I was trembling, both with rage and fear from his unexpected behavior. John, seeming completely unapologetic, said, "You're just a leech living off me. If you've got a problem, divorce me and leave." His eyes, once filled with kindness when we first met, now appeared cold and distant. Looking closer, I could tell that even the glasses and tie John was wearing seemed expensive. Just by his appearance and behavior alone, it was clear how self-centered he was. "Well, I'm leaving." I said that, quickly packed my things, and left right away. And I swore to myself that I would get back at John. Although John clearly saw me leave the house, he made no move to stop me. In fact, he had an expression that almost seemed grateful I was going. I was shocked by how much John had changed. It chilled my heart to realize how quickly love can fade, even after we'd been so in love when we got married. I think I was probably crying at that moment. By the time the taxi I caught reached my parents' home, my tears had stopped, but the emptiness remained. My mother greeted me with surprise but warmth.
"I don't know what happened, but come on inside."
"Thank you, Mom."
"It's okay, honey. We're family, it's what we do."
"Yeah, thank you so much." The moment my mother hugged me, I started crying again. I thought my love for John had long since faded, yet I still found myself crying over him. Maybe deep down, I didn't want to leave John and was shocked by our separation. With so many emotions swirling inside me, my mother held me close, never letting go. Wrapped in my mother's love, I felt alive again, and an overwhelming sense of happiness.
"Something must have really hurt you."
Seeing me cry, my mother stroked my head just like she used to when I was little. We went inside, and my mother tried to distract me with some funny TV shows and offered me some oranges she'd gotten from a neighbor. By the time I'd finished the oranges, the TV show that came on was a comedy show that John and I used to watch together. It was a simple show where a humorous host chatted with comedians and celebrities. We really loved it. I was just silently watching that show, but I must have had a somber look on my face. Seeing me like that, my mother must have become worried and asked,
"Linda, did something happen with John?"
"There's been a lot, Mom. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin."
"Oh, I see. It's okay, Linda. Take your time and tell me at your own pace, okay?"
"Yeah, I'll do that." With that, I told my mother everything that had happened. After listening to my entire story, my mother was livid.
"I can't believe someone would make my Linda feel this way. You can stay here as long as you want and relax. It must have been hard on you." "Thanks, Mom. So, you're close with John's mom since you both went to the same school. Could you, maybe, mention what John did to me?"
"Got it. I'll talk to her the next time we see each other. Leave it to me." Thanks to my mother talking to my mother-in-law, John got into big trouble. I had a missed call from John on my phone. When I called back, John shouted angrily,
"Hey, what's going on? The allowance I was getting from my parents suddenly stopped, and it's causing me problems. You had something to do with it, didn't you?"
Apparently, John had some debts from gambling, and he'd been using about 70% of his salary and the entire allowance from his parents to pay it off. Due to the sudden stop in his allowance, he was clearly panicking. Though it was due to my mother's interference that John's allowance was cut off, I didn't want anything to do with him, so I played dumb.
"I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm busy. Bye." With that, I hung up. I felt a bit relieved knowing John was facing this predicament, but I wasn't completely at peace. The resentment I had towards John kept building up, and my stress had solidified over time. Just a little revenge wasn't going to be enough to ease it. And the thing is, when people have too much time on their hands, they tend to obsess over petty things. Of course, I was no exception. As days went by, my grudge against John only deepened, and there wasn't much I could do about it. I could have vented to my mother, but I felt bad complaining about the same thing repeatedly, and I already knew her response would be predictable. So, I decided to reach out to my old friend, Alicia. Alicia responded immediately, and I could tell she was doing well. "I've got something to tell you. Wanna grab a coffee sometime?" I suggested, and Alicia agreed enthusiastically. As the day approached to meet Alicia, I felt excited. It made me realize how much I enjoy social interactions. Just thinking about what to wear was exhilarating. On the day of our meetup, Alicia and I met up and went to a nearby cafe. There, I told Alicia everything about what John had done and the current situation.
"I see, that sounds tough. Yeah, and John would give me so little for household expenses, but he always bought expensive stuff for himself. His glasses had all these fine details and embellishments, and his tie was made of what seemed to be expensive fabric with beautiful red and blue stripes." As I described the unique features of John's belongings, Alicia seemed to recall something and went silent for a moment. After taking a deep breath, she asked me, "Hey, Linda, can you tell me your husband's name?"
I feel like I might know him.
Oh, really? You know him? His name is John Martinez. I do know him. Wow, John Martinez is my boss. I really don't like him. He's so annoying and nitpicky, and his instructions at work are hard to understand.
I had no idea. But how did you figure it out?
Well, I happened to remember my boss wearing a distinctive tie that looked expensive. So when you mentioned a similar tie, I just thought maybe, and bingo! I was shocked.
I see. So, can you spread the word at the company about how messed up John is?
That sounds good. If all goes well, he might quit, and you can get back at him. I'd be happy to help.
And so, Alicia began to spread rumors about John being an unreliable husband at the office. Gradually, the news spread throughout the company. By that time, John felt like he was walking on eggshells, finding it difficult to be at work. After a while, I started receiving emails from him. The emails were about how he felt uncomfortable at the office and didn't know what to do. For my part, I felt like shouting at John.
Why should I care? If you hadn't done what you did to me, none of this would have happened. It's all your own doing.
But I didn't want anything to do with John, so I ignored the emails. However, it's strange how men act. The moment a woman stops chasing after them, they start chasing the woman. I've read about this phenomenon in many relationship advice books, but I never thought it would actually happen to me. Probably because I had been ignoring John's emails, I received another email from him.
After some thought, I realized that I need you, Linda. I want to discuss our future and try to start over. Please, can we meet?
I could feel the desperation in John's message, and by the time I finished reading, I was completely drained. Even a single email from John could ruin the good mood my mother and Alicia had set for me. Such power he had. Now, how to deal with this email? I did think about ignoring it again, but on second thought, John and I are technically still married. Honestly, I wished I could erase the fact that I registered our marriage with someone who brings me down. I even wanted to divorce him right away. So, thanks to John's email, I finally made up my mind to get a divorce. I acted swiftly. All right, if we involve our parents in the discussion, I'm okay with meeting you. And that's how I responded to John immediately. Soon after, I received a reply from John, and I was able to get his approval. I bet John probably thinks that because I'm seriously considering our future together, that's why I've said I want to discuss things involving both our families. He's likely in La La Land, completely misunderstanding the situation. As for me, I was in the middle of a triumphant pose, having successfully led John to that mistaken belief. I had been strategizing with my mother about how we'd teach John a lesson, and my mother had shared the plan with my mother-in-law. Then, surprisingly, my father-in-law also decided to join our strategy. It seemed that my mother-in-law and father-in-law were appalled at John's irresponsibility and bad character. They no longer saw him as their son. That's probably why they sided with me in this situation. So, with everyone except John, we kept discussing and refining our plan. On the day of the confrontation, my mother and I headed to the house where John lived. Upon arrival, John greeted us with a smile, but I felt a chill. Already in the living room were my mother-in-law and father-in-law. When everyone had gathered, John began to speak.
Linda, would you live with me in this house again?
No, I want a divorce. I calmly responded and began laying out the lawyer's business card and various pieces of evidence of his affairs on the table. Seeing this, John paled as my mother-in-law and father-in-law started berating him.
How could you, as a man, let Linda go through all that?
I never thought you'd turn out to be such a loser. We're done with you.
Really, I don't want to see your face anymore, John. Linda, you can always rely on me, okay?
With that, John was berated by his parents, got a firm disownment, and in the end, it was settled that he'd divorce me.
Tell me it's a lie. I know I messed up. I'm sorry. Please, everyone, forgive me.
John's pitiful voice echoed throughout the living room. Afterwards, my divorce from John went through smoothly, and a little later, when I informed Alicia about it, she said she had some news too. Given the cheeriness in Alicia's voice, I thought maybe she was gonna get married, but that wasn't the case. Turns out, Alicia joyfully informed me that John had quit his job. According to Alicia's story, after John and I divorced, he felt increasingly uncomfortable at work and eventually chose to resign voluntarily.
Well, I'm just glad I don't have to deal with that annoying boss nitpicking or taking those lousy job instructions anymore. Really, it feels like a thanks for letting me go moment.
Alicia's carefree voice came over the phone. As for me, hearing about John's voluntary resignation, I felt a mix of happiness and emptiness. I mean, I didn't like John anymore, but he was once someone I loved. The fact that he left his job because of our issues weighed on me a bit. But John not only subjected me to financial abuse but also cheated on me. Maybe it was some kind of divine retribution. At least, that's how I tried to see it. Plus, John divided the property appropriately. Rumor has it that John is working day and night to pay off his debts and cover his living expenses. Seems like fitting punishment for him, if you ask me. As for myself, I've been living with my mother as usual. But I realized I couldn't keep doing that forever, so I started working as a full-time office worker again. Having had experience in administrative roles, I got hired quickly. My company regards me as an immediate asset, and they rely on me. Contrary to popular belief, office work can be pretty intricate when you get into the details. We administrative staff need to communicate well, teach each other, and sometimes cover for someone on maternity leave. Teamwork is essential. Working like this, naturally, I became close with my coworkers. That's why I really enjoy my job. Even when I come home tired, my mother, unchanged from those days, warmly welcomes me and has dinner ready. Having dinner with my mother, we chat about what happened at work today or engage in some light-hearted banter. I truly enjoy these moments. Frankly, my married life with John lacked these warm moments. It was pretty bland. So, I cherish this happiness every day, living joyfully with my mother. I can't thank you enough to my mother.
Daddy always buys me candies.
I couldn't believe my kind husband, who cares so much for our daughter, would do something like this. At this point, I was still unaware of the true meaning behind his overtime work. My name is Natalie Thompson. I am 36 years old. My husband, Ken, and I have been married for 6 years and we have a 4-year-old daughter. I am a mother, but also a surgeon. I have been busy with my work since we got married. Ken, aware of my busy schedule, said, "Let's work through this together." And so, we got married. Later on, we were able to have a child. I went back to work shortly after our daughter was born. I wanted to watch our daughter grow a little more, but my job was so demanding that I couldn't take much time off. Despite my busy days, I don't think I've neglected my daughter, and I believe I've given her plenty of love. I think Ken is very supportive when it comes to parenting. He makes time to play with our daughter, and even when I'm not around, he can almost perfectly handle bathing her and getting her dressed. Our 4-year-old daughter loves her dad. Ken has his own job and it must be tough for him, but since our daughter was born, he has been very considerate of my busy work schedule. I have some late nights at work. Even when I'm home, I often have to work. Still, Ken always tells me, "Don't overdo it. I'll take care of our daughter." I took comfort in Ken's words. But I didn't know yet. I couldn't believe that my kind husband was doing something like this. Our daughter attends daycare, and I usually drop her off in the morning, while Ken, who has a more flexible schedule, picks her up. Since she has been going to daycare since she was a baby, she has many friends. She even says she wants to go to daycare on her days off, she enjoys it that much. What I looked forward to the most each day was hearing stories about my daughter's day at daycare after I got home from work. She would tell me stories about playing with her friends at daycare, like building sandcastles or racing to the park. And she would always talk about her time with Ken as well.
"Today, Daddy and I went shopping for dinner."
She always seemed so happy when she talked about it, which made me feel warm inside. I couldn't be more thankful to Ken, who was doing such a great job with our daughter. I had never heard Ken mention having to work overtime before. His company, being relatively large, seemed to encourage employees to leave work on time. So, Ken rarely came home late. But one day, he texted me saying he had to work late and asked if I could pick up our daughter. Fortunately, I was able to arrange my schedule that day and picked her up instead of Ken. Until then, Ken had always been the one to pick her up because of his flexible schedule, so I hadn't heard him mention overtime work before. I thought maybe he had been managing to adjust his schedule all this time, even when it was difficult. At the time, I didn't think much of it. When Ken came home, I asked him, "Have you been adjusting your schedule to pick up our daughter even when you're busy?" After a brief pause, he replied, "It's been a bit busier lately." Ken has a managerial position, so he has a lot of responsibilities. I told him, "If I can arrange my schedule, I'll pick her up, so let me know if you're having a tough time." My husband just said thank you and played with our daughter. After telling him this, he gradually started asking me to pick up our daughter more frequently. I thought it was unavoidable due to work, so I explained the situation to my workplace, arranged time to pick up my daughter, and asked my mother at home to help until I finished work. This went on for 2 months. Eventually, I couldn't take time off every time, so I asked my husband if there was any other way. He then said,
"I have a position too, I can't keep saying that. Taking care of the child is a mother's job, right?"
I was surprised because he had never said anything like that before. I wondered what had suddenly happened. I thought he might have become harsh due to stress and busyness. However, this incident changed my husband's attitude towards me. Until now, he used to help with household chores and child rearing when I was busy with work, but he stopped doing anything at all. He became busier and couldn't manage everything. I thought I should do whatever I could. However, there were times when I couldn't handle all the housework. Even when I asked for help, he recently started saying,
"It's because you prioritize your work."
I understood that. But the fact is, I can't neglect my work when I have patients. He should understand that since he married me, so why suddenly say such a thing? I had one guess. It was that my husband had often tried to talk to me at night. I had been saying I was busy with work or had work left. Admittedly, my husband hasn't been a priority lately. I'm busy, and since our daughter was born, I haven't felt that way. If I have time for my husband, I'd rather rest, to be honest. I hadn't realized that this was the reason I was coming home late. Lately, my husband often said he would be late because he was busy at work. I thought it was unusual after so many years, but I couldn't say anything because I had relied on him too much. However, we have a daughter, so we have no choice but to cooperate. I told my husband that I didn't need him to pick up our daughter every time, but I wanted him to make time somehow. After thinking for a while, he reluctantly agreed. Since then, I haven't heard him say he's working overtime as much. He's been picking up our daughter properly. I felt bad for putting all the burden on my husband, so I told him to adjust within his limits. He just said he understood. However, his attitude towards me remained the same. I wondered why my husband's attitude had changed, but it didn't take long to find out. One day, I was able to finish work earlier than usual. That day, there was no message from my husband saying he would be late due to overtime, so I was a little excited to spend time with my family. My husband usually buys ready-made meals or quickly prepares food. I always rely on my husband, so I decided to cook homemade food after a long time. I wanted to make a lot of their favorite dishes. I was desperately thinking about the menu on my way home. It was time for my daughter and husband to come home, so I finished shopping for dinner and hurried home. Today, I can get home early and listen to my daughter's stories slowly. My daughter, who always wants to help, will probably want to cook together. I was excited. After my daughter went to bed, I thought about having a drink with my husband. I opened the front door with such thoughts. I checked if my daughter and husband had come home. But I felt something was wrong. For some reason, the shoes were arranged differently than usual. I thought my daughter had lined up the shoes I had forgotten to put away. I cautiously looked at the shoes in the entrance again and saw my daughter's and husband's familiar shoes. So far, everything was normal. But there was also a pair of shoes with a design that young girls would like. Why are these shoes at our house? Before I could understand what was happening, I hurried into the house and went to the living room. When I quietly opened the living room door, my daughter was eating snacks and watching TV alone.
Welcome back, Mom. You're early today.
What's going on? My daughter was watching TV alone as if it were a regular thing. I asked my daughter without understanding the situation. I'm home. I saw Daddy's shoes, but where is Daddy?
Daddy is working with someone from his office in the room upstairs, so wait by watching TV.
Hearing that, I got goosebumps. From the shoes at the entrance and my daughter's words, I could somehow sense what was happening. No, but it's impossible. Would my husband, who cares about our daughter, do such a thing? I went upstairs, trying not to think too much and holding my breath. And then, I confirmed that there was some noise coming from a room. I hesitated for a moment, but then I forcefully opened the door of that room. My head went blank and I felt like I couldn't breathe. There, I saw a sight I didn't even want to imagine, my husband and another woman. Hey! Natalie, what are you doing here?
It's not what are you doing here, is it? What are you doing in our bedroom? Who is that woman? And what do you mean by leaving our daughter alone in the living room?
I couldn't stop talking.
Just get dressed quickly and explain.
My hand trembling with anger as I closed the door. Leaving our 4-year-old daughter alone in the living room, what was this man thinking? Moreover, bringing a woman into our house and into the bed where our whole family sleeps. After a while, when I opened the door, the two were sitting side by side, dressed.
What does this mean?
I asked, pretending to be calm.
Well, this is...
At first, my husband, Ken, tried to make an excuse, but then the woman beside him whispered, "Is that your wife?" And he suddenly said to me,
"It's because you're always working and never paying attention to me. This is your own fault."
That's right. Poor Ken. Well, it seems like he doesn't see you as a woman anymore, old lady.
That's right. Now that you understand, get out quickly.
What is he talking about? While thinking that in the back of my mind, I was already running down the stairs before he finished talking. I wanted to retort more, but I was not in the mood due to anger and sadness. I just wanted to get away from there as quickly as possible. Then, while eating snacks and sitting cutely watching TV, I told my daughter, "Let's go out." My daughter asked without hesitation,
"Where's Daddy?"
"Daddy is busy with work." It was hard to explain to my daughter, and I held back my tears of anger and headed for my parents' house. In the car, I asked my daughter, "Has Daddy ever said he was working with a woman at home after picking you up from daycare?"
"Yes. He said it was important work, so I had to watch TV quietly. And, don't tell Mommy. If you can keep it a secret, you can eat snacks. Amy and Daddy always bought me lots of snacks. I'm sorry, Mommy."
My daughter called the woman Amy. "Do you know the name of the lady?" My daughter was a quick learner. She remembered the woman's name and told me. I felt guilty and angry at my daughter's innocent words, and the tears I had been holding back came out. My husband, who had bribed a small child with snacks to keep quiet and brought a woman into our home several times while leaving her alone in the room, was unforgivable. And I started thinking about how to get back at those two. And decided to consult someone. When I have a problem, there is always one person I consult first. It was my boss at work. This boss introduced us and knows my husband's company well. He has been a trustworthy person who has listened to my problems sincerely since I started working. I told my boss about what happened and the woman's name. My boss listened seriously but didn't say much, just listened to my story. And then he went back to work. A week later, I was called by my boss. I thought it was about the consultation. My boss had secretly investigated. It turned out that the woman my husband was having an affair with was a student working part-time at my husband's company. I became very sad when a student stole my husband, but the thought of my husband being smitten with that student gave me goosebumps. I was introduced to someone by my boss, whom I had consulted. It turned out to be the hospital director, whom I also knew. I was wondering why the director was introduced to me, when my boss said,
"Actually, I was consulted by the director as well. It seems that his daughter is not going to school much, and he's wondering what to do. It's surprising that she is not only skipping school but also having an affair."
My boss seemed to be surprised as well. It turned out that the daughter, whom the director had consulted about, was the woman with whom my husband was having an affair. I thought the world was a small place. According to my boss, the woman my husband was having an affair with is a medical student aiming to become a doctor. I wondered why she was working part-time at my husband's company, which is not related to medicine. However, it didn't take long to find out. I decided to lay in wait near my husband's office. I was surprised that I was trying to meet the woman my husband was having an affair with, but I had no intention of backing down. Then, the woman appeared. When she noticed me, she said,
"Eh? What? A middle-aged woman laying in wait?
Scary. She can say whatever she wants."
"Today, you are not with my husband, are you?"
The woman laughed snidely and said with a composed expression,
"I'm not with him every day. But sorry for stealing your high-income husband, old lady."
While thinking that I earn more than my husband, I continued, "I heard you are a medical student. Why are you working part-time at my husband's company, which has nothing to do with being a doctor?" The woman, looking shocked, glared at me as if to say,
"You've researched that much?" Ken kept saying he wanted me near him. He was persistent, but Ken buys me anything. It's nice to have a high-income boyfriend.
The woman seemed to consider my husband as nothing more than a cash cow. I felt a bit sorry for my husband, who didn't know he was thought of in that way, but that didn't matter anymore.
"If you are aiming to be a doctor, shouldn't you be going to school and studying properly? Why do I have to be told what to do by an old lady like you? Can you stop picking on me just because your husband was stolen?"
It's my business, isn't it? When I told her that her father was worried about her, the woman's face started to turn pale.
"Why are you bringing up my father? Don't say careless things without knowing anything."
I made a call to someone on the spot. And within a minute, the director appeared. As soon as the director saw me, he apologized, saying, "I am truly sorry for my daughter." The woman, who didn't understand why her father was there, was flustered.
"I heard everything. What are you doing, not going to school and playing with someone else's husband? What's fun about that?"
The woman's father, the director, seemed to be a very strict person, and she seemed unable to talk back.
"Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know he was married."
She was desperately trying to make excuses even at this point, but the director had heard the entire conversation between us. "Whether he was married or not, what you are doing is pathetic, and there was no excuse that would work." Afterwards, the woman, who couldn't say anything to her father, was taken home by the director. I had planned this day with the director immediately after my boss introduced us. When I told the director about my husband, he held his head in his hands, saying, "I can't believe my daughter is doing such a pathetic thing." And then he said,
"I will scold my daughter properly, so please demand compensation or anything you need."
I once thought that it would be unreasonable to demand compensation from a student, but considering the director's feelings, I decided to demand it properly. I returned home after a month. It seems that my husband is feeling down, maybe because he lost contact with the woman he was having an affair with. During this month, he did not apologize to me at all, only contacted me about our daughter. He probably thought I would come back eventually and waited carelessly. I have been preparing for divorce this past month. I am also considering taking a significant amount of money from both of them. Of course, I will make my husband pay child support. I placed the business card of my divorce lawyer and a settlement document regarding child support and property division in front of my husband. I remember reading somewhere that it's good to prepare a settlement document to make sure you get paid properly. It said that if you do not get paid, you can take legal action. I have lost trust in my husband due to this incident, and I thought of getting revenge by being thorough. I consulted with my lawyer multiple times and created the settlement document. When my husband saw the business card and settlement document, he quickly said, "I don't want a divorce." He insisted he only met the woman once, but I told him our daughter said she had been coming and going from our house multiple times and had even bribed her with candy. Do you believe what a 4-year-old child says more than me? That's impossible.
I trust Mindy more than you. I won't forgive you for belittling Mindy just because she's a child.
It seemed my husband was angry that I believed our daughter more than him. No matter what I said, he insisted it was only once, so I presented a recording I secretly made when he met the woman. You met Amy behind my back and even recorded it? I didn't know you had the courage to do such a thing. He seemed to be belittling me. And he was confident that the woman wouldn't say anything bad about him. However, when he heard the woman referring to him as a cash cow, he was shocked. He was in love with her. Unable to make excuses, my husband bowed his head in silence. I said firmly,
I don't want to waste any more time on you, so sign the settlement document quickly.
Reluctantly, he signed the document. Later, I visited my boss who had advised me and reported the situation, expressing my gratitude. My boss told me that when I mentioned the woman's name, he recognized it and immediately understood the situation. Thanks to my boss, I was able to get a divorce. Afterward, the divorce was finalized. I demanded money from both my husband and the woman he had an affair with. I got custody of our daughter. My husband, who loves our daughter despite what he did, begged me to let him see her until the end. But I firmly refused, not wanting my daughter to see a man who had a relationship with another woman while leaving her behind. My husband was disheartened, but he couldn't afford to be down because he had to work hard to pay child support. It seems that the woman was scolded severely by her father after that. Her father found out she was neglecting school and getting involved with men and told her,
Can someone like you handle a job where you are responsible for people's lives? If you are serious, retake the entrance exam.
He also told her to drop out and repay the tuition. It seems the woman is working hard to earn money to pay back her father for the tuition and my consolation money. As for me, I am still busy, but I make sure to spend quality time with my daughter, and I feel fulfilled.